It all began as a whisper soft, almost trembling like a secret that shouldn't have been spoken aloud. Meghan's own mother, Doria, leaned in one quiet afternoon and asked something so strange, so delicate, that it froze everyone around her. What are Archie and Lilibet really like? I've never truly seen them. The room went still. No one breathed for a second. Because how could a grandmother ask that? A grandmother is supposed to know she should remember tiny birthdays, laughter echoing through halls, those sticky little fingers reaching for her hand. But Doria? She couldn't describe a single thing. Not their smiles, not their giggles, not even their favorite toys. And when she softly admitted that she had never really been with them, that's when everything changed. Those few quiet words cracked something open, a door everyone thought would stay shut forever. If even Doria, Meghan's own mother, had barely seen the children, then who had? And why did she sound almost afraid to ask? That was the first sign something about Meghan and Harry's perfect family life wasn't quite matching the glowing image they showed to the world. Behind those glamorous smiles, behind that glossy Netflix life, something just didn't fit. And once that first whisper escaped, the truth started slipping out like air from a balloon, slow, unstoppable, and impossible to hide. The next voice to speak wasn't a journalist or a friend. It came from someone who had lived inside those walls longer than anyone else. Someone who had seen it all, except for the very thing she was supposed to see. When the maid finally spoke, her voice wasn't seeking attention. She didn't want fame or scandal. She just couldn't carry the silence any longer. She had worked there for months, 12 hours a day, 5 days a week. She cleaned every room, polished every surface, walked those long hallways where royal life was supposed to unfold. Yet, she said the house didn't feel alive. It didn't sound like a home filled with children's laughter. It didn't look like a place where a family lived. It felt like something else entirely, a movie set. Perfect, polished, and frozen in time once the camera stopped rolling. Every cushion was perfectly placed. Every frame perfectly hung. Too perfect. Nothing out of place. Nothing used. Nothing that felt real. The maid didn't sound like someone bitter. Her voice was steady, calm, but tired, like someone who wished her eyes were lying. Because what she found most unsettling wasn't what she saw. It was what she didn't. A home with children should be alive. You should hear footsteps, giggles, toys being tossed around, crayons under the table, little shoes by the door, maybe a cry in the distance. But in that mansion, nothing, not even a sound. No toys, no clothes drying in the sun, no laughter, no tiny socks lost under chairs. She'd walk into a room, pause, and just listen, waiting to hear something that proved children lived there. But there was only silence. A heavy, eerie silence that made her stomach twist. One afternoon, she quietly asked another staff member, "Do you ever see the children?" The woman only shook her head and whispered, "Never." And that wasn't after 1 week or a month. This was after months of working from sunrise to sunset. The world believed Archie and Lilibet were growing up behind those grand gates, but the people inside, the ones who saw everything, couldn't find a trace of them. The more the maid remembered, the stranger things felt. A normal mother checks on her kids, talks to them, picks up their toys. But Meghan, her movements never felt like that. At first, Meghan would come by 3 or 4 times a week, but even then, she didn't stay long. She swept through the front door like someone stepping onto a stage, talking fast, always busy, always watched, and she was never alone. There was always someone behind her, Marcus Anderson, a blonde assistant, sometimes even a camera crew with lighting and sound gear. To the staff, it didn't feel like a family home anymore. It felt like a production set, scenes being filmed, not lived. As weeks turned into months, Meghan's visits dropped to just 2 days a week. Staff whispered she seemed more like a guest than a mother, like she was checking on a project, not visiting her own kids. And then came something worse. The maid said Meghan's actions looked rehearsed. She only spoke to people when cameras were around. She looked in mirrors more than she looked at faces. Every movement felt performed. That's when it started to make sense. The house wasn't for a family, it was for an image. Then came the night everything changed. It was late. The maid was wiping the kitchen counters when shouting echoed down the hallway, sharp, angry, loud enough to make her freeze. She moved closer, not to eavesdrop, but because it was impossible not to hear. She recognized Meghan's voice first, but what chilled her was Harry's. It wasn't angry, it was pleading. When she reached the doorway, she saw Harry holding Meghan's arms, begging her to stop as she tried to strike him. He wasn't fighting back. He wasn't yelling. He just looked broken. His face was flushed with humiliation and exhaustion. Marcus Anderson stepped in, pulling Meghan away, while Harry stumbled into a chair. Then everything went silent. That thick, cold silence that fills the air after something terrible happens. The maid quietly walked in and handed Harry a glass of water. He whispered, "Thank you." And in that moment, she said she saw everything, the sadness, the pressure, the emptiness in his eyes. After that night, everything changed. Smiles vanished. Laughter died. The house grew tense and heavy, like even the walls were holding their breath. But the part that truly shook everyone, the part that made headlines when she finally confessed, was this. The maid said she never once saw Meghan pregnant. Not with Archie, not with Lilibet, not ever. She didn't see a baby bump. She didn't see morning sickness. She didn't see any of those little signs every expecting mother shows. Nothing. At first, she thought maybe she had missed it. But how could she? She worked 12 hours a day, 5 days a week, and saw Meghan almost daily before her visits slowed down. She saw her up close walking, adjusting clothes, moving through rooms, and still no sign of pregnancy. When she whispered this to others, they admitted the same thing. They hadn't seen anything either. Meanwhile, the world outside saw glowing magazine covers, flowing maternity dresses, photos of Meghan cradling her belly with that perfect smile. But inside the house, nothing matched. The maid's voice didn't tremble when she said it. She wasn't making wild claims. She was simply describing what she didn't see. And for her, that absence was the biggest truth of all. Something about those pregnancies just didn't add up. Months after leaving, the maid sat in her tiny apartment watching the Netflix documentary on Meghan and Harry. She thought she might see rooms she'd cleaned, halls she'd walked. But as the show rolled on, her mouth fell open. The house on the screen wasn't the house she worked in. The walls looked different. The garden was shaped differently. Even the chicken coop she had cleaned under that coop herself looked nothing like the one shown on camera. And those home moments? Meghan smiling in golden light, cradling a belly, playing with children in the garden, it all felt fake, like a reenactment filmed somewhere else. The maid knew that garden. She'd cleaned every inch of it. She'd never seen children there. Not once. That's when it hit her like a punch. If the footage wasn't filmed at their real home, what else wasn't real? She realized then, the mansion wasn't built for family. It was built to hide secrets. Every morning, the staff had to hand over their phones before entering. Security checked bags, padded pockets, scanned for hidden cameras. No one could take photos, write notes, or whisper to anyone outside. One afternoon, a worker simply took a picture of flowers outside the gate. Within minutes, security stormed in, grabbed her phone, and deleted the image. The air turned cold. Everyone learned their lesson. It wasn't about privacy. It was about control. The house felt like a fortress, not a home. Silence was the rule. Secrets were the foundation. Whispers began spreading among staff, quiet, fearful, never loud enough for guards to hear. Some had worked there longer than the maid, and they all admitted the same thing. They had never seen Archie, never seen Lilibet, not once. The woman who did laundry whispered, "There are no children's clothes." The one who managed groceries said, "I've never bought baby food." Even the security guards exchanged uneasy looks. None of them wanted drama, they just couldn't ignore what was in front of them, nothing. Day after day, silence filled the spaces where childhood should have lived. And as the months went by, it became undeniable. Everyone inside the house felt that something precious was missing. Something the world believed was right there behind those gates, but no one inside could find a trace of. It all circles back to that same question, whispered first by Doria herself. If even the people closest to Meghan and Harry never saw Archie and Lilibet, then where were the children? The public saw perfect photos, glowing smiles, cinematic family scenes, but the people who lived inside saw emptiness. They saw a story so carefully crafted that even the truth struggled to breathe. And until someone answers that question, the question that echoes through the stillness of that grand, silent house, the world will keep wondering. Because in the end, no illusion lasts forever. Every lie fades eventually. And when it does, the truth is always waiting right behind it. But the story didn't end there. If anything, what followed made everything even more haunting. Months after the maid left, small pieces of information started surfacing, little fragments that, when put together, made the silence around that house even louder. A gardener who once tended the grounds said he never saw toys outside, never picked up a ball or a doll left in the grass. He said even the footprints near the sandbox looked staged, like someone had pressed them there for photos, and then smoothed the soil afterward. Everything looked arranged, not lived in. A driver who had worked for another member of staff claimed that he once waited outside the gate for hours to deliver what he thought were children's clothes. When the package was finally checked by security, the guards came back out holding the box. They said the order had been canceled, there were no children to deliver to. That story, quiet and unbelievable, spread in whispers across those who had once worked behind those gates. And then came the strangest detail of all. A staff member remembered seeing tiny shoes, once 2 pairs, one pink, one blue, sitting neatly on a shelf near the entrance. They looked brand new, like props. The next day, they were gone. When she asked where they went, another worker shrugged and said, "They're for display." That answer stayed with her, because what kind of home puts display shoes out for children who aren't there? Doria's question began echoing everywhere. People who had once dismissed her curiosity now felt it crawl under their skin. If a grandmother had to ask where her grandchildren were, what did that say about the world Meghan had built? Was it possible that the life they had so carefully shown the cameras was just that, a performance? Even the neighbors began to wonder. They said the mansion lights were always dimmed early, as if the house were empty. No one heard bedtime stories, no soft laughter carried through the garden, no sound of children splashing in the pool, just quiet. An expensive, unnatural quiet that wrapped the property like a fog. One evening, long after she'd left her job, the maid received a call from another former employee. Her voice trembled as she whispered, Do you think they even live there anymore?" The maid didn't know how to answer, because deep down, she'd asked herself the same thing. What if the place wasn't just protecting secrets, it was pretending to be something it wasn't? What if the people who smiled for the cameras were smiling for a story they'd built, not a life they'd lived? Sometimes, late at night, the maid says she still dreams of those long, quiet halls. She hears her own footsteps echo off the marble, feels that still air pressing down. She wakes up sweating, heart racing, haunted by the same unanswered question that started it all. Where were the children? And maybe that's why, no matter how many times Meghan smiles for the world, no matter how many perfect photos appear online, the whispers keep coming back stronger, sharper, and more certain than before. Because a secret can be hidden, but not forever. A truth can be buried, but only for so long. And when that truth finally surfaces, it doesn't knock politely. It breaks through everything, just like that first whisper from Doria did. Because deep down, everyone knows, silence doesn't protect innocence. It protects something else, something far darker.